A brand motif is the cohesive visual theme that a brand uses to create a recognizable identity, including elements like images, colors, textures, and patterns. In a brand campaign to promote a design event, a brand motif is crucial because it ensures consistency across all materials, creating a unified and memorable brand presence. The use of a consistent motif helps reinforce an event's theme and message, strengthens brand recognition, and sets the tone for the event. A brand motif can enhance the overall impact of a campaign by making communication visually engaging and aligned with a brand's identity. In this video, I'm going to show you how to lay out a set of dynamic visual elements, which we will use as part of a brand campaign to promote a fictional design exhibition event. This brand motif is what will feature on further collateral we will be developing later on in this course. So here I am in InDesign, and here is a set of collage compositions I prepared earlier. In this video, we are going to look at how we can swiftly set up compositions like this. To create this collage, we're going to cover the following key steps. This is a methodical process that will ensure we create quality design in InDesign and not leave anything unchecked. So be sure to check the bookmarks in this video so you can jump back or ahead at any time. After this video, you'll be able to work with multiple assets to create complex compositions in InDesign super easy. So let's get into it. So on this course, we're learning all about how to set up a series of documents for publication design. But at this point, it would help to keep in mind that InDesign can be used not only to create documents for publishing, but it can also be used as an effective tool to manage your content. For this example, we have a series of pages where I have composed and outlined the brand motif visuals. So this isn't a document that I might print. However, it's a document that I am using to organize the visual elements for the Design Expo brand. Here I have focused purely on the visual elements and compositions of the collages separately, which will make it easy to come back to later to copy them to include in other documents. One of the goals of this video is to help you see InDesign in a different way. Of course, InDesign is mainly designed for publication design, but it can also be an amazing tool to help with your organization and creative workflow. Now, there are a variety of ways you could approach working with digital art and compositions like this. One could simply create these compositions in an app like Illustrator and place them in as links. However, we wouldn't have the flexibility to move around and control the individual elements of the collage in context. Later on, we're going to be using these motifs across a wide range of documents. So in this instance, it will be more effective to create this artwork in InDesign, which will enable us to control all the individual elements as we bring them into various documents later on. If you want to take a look at this document and get all the assets to follow along, you can get access to this document from the course download folder. This download folder comes with multiple projects and a ton of assets and resources we will be using on this course. You can find the link to acquire the folder from the description. With the download folder open, click into folder 4 project, into the Design Expo folder, click into folder 2 Event Publication Design, and open the Event Design InDesign file. This is a document that contains all of the publication designs we will be creating for this course. If we scroll down to the Marketing Collateral page, we can see a variety of documents. For this video, we are going to look at the Collage document. So with the selection tool, I'll select the Collage thumbnail. Now I'll either come to the links panel and click Edit Original, or I'll hold Alt on the keyboard and double click on the worksheet thumbnail, and the document will open in its own tab. Now for this document, I'm using the font Base New. If you have not already downloaded all the fonts for this course, this is a free font that you can acquire online. To get this font, I would recommend you check out the course fonts page on the course PDF document. This is a list of all the fonts that are used in this class and where to get them. Simply click on the Base New link, and this will take you straight to where you can download it. Simply close this document, install the fonts, open it back up again, and you should be able to follow along just fine. So if we press W on the keyboard to toggle between normal and preview mode, in normal mode we can see all the frame boxes creating this composition. If we look closely, each frame has a different color, representing which layer it currently resides on. In the layers panel we have 3 layers, one for type, one for elements, and one for base. Now these are quite busy collages with lots of visual elements, So the Layers panel has been set up this way to make it easy to organize and manage the visual elements. Also, if we look carefully, we can see that some elements do not have bounding boxes. That is because these elements are not actually images, they are vector textures which have been pasted in. More on this later. So let's see how we can create a digital collage composition like this. To begin, I'm going to come up to File, New, and create a new document. Now for this document, we're not creating any particular publication. We're just going to create some artwork. So here, it could be any size. To make it straightforward, I'll go for an A4 page preset, and I'll make sure the orientation is set to portrait. Now I don't want facing pages, so I'll make sure this is unchecked. I'll set the pages to 1 and click Create, and my new document will open. Now before I start, I just want to get my center and middle horizontal lines. One quick and simple tip to do this: come up to the Pages panel and double click on the parent page. I'll drag a frame from the top left down to the bottom right of the canvas area. I press Command R on Mac or Control R on PC to toggle on the rulers. And with my bounding box selected, I'll be able to drag from the top down and place a guide in the middle of my page. And I'll also be able to drag from the left and place another guide in the middle of my page. Once happy, I'll just delete the frame, double click on the page in the Pages panel, and now we're back and we can easily see the guides. Another thing to do before we start is to set up our layers. So I'll come to the Layers panel, double click on my layer, and I'll rename this to Base. I'll click the plus icon to add a new layer, and I'll call this Elements. I'll click another layer and call this Type. I'll make sure my layers are ordered correctly with the type at the top, elements in the middle, and base at the bottom. Once I have my document set up, I can now start thinking about working with visual elements. So the first element I'm going to work with are the images. So looking back at my final designs, regarding imagery, we can see that for each composition there is a background solid shape with a gradient fill effect. And on top of this, we have a grayscale object with some surrounding shapes and textures. So let's start with the base layer and work our way up. To begin, I'll click on the base layer in the Layers panel. I'll come over to the Tools menu, click and hold on the frame to select an ellipse. Then I'll just come into the canvas area, click and drag down while holding Shift to create a perfectly scaled ellipse. I'll make it around 2/3 of the size of the page. Upon release, I'll then move my frame to fit perfectly in the middle. Now to be specific, so you can follow along exactly, up in the control panel, I'll set the width to 155mm and the height to 155mm and position it in the center, like so. Now if your units are not set to millimeters, come into your preferences, click on Units and Increments on the left, and set your horizontal and vertical units to millimeters. Click OK, and you should be able to set your value to millimeters. Nice. So in this instance, I'm not going to use a color fill, but an image fill. Next, I'll come into the Design Expo Brand Toolkit. With the download folder open, click into folder 4 Project, into the Design Expo folder, click into folder 1 Media Kit, and open the Design Expo Brand Kit InDesign file. This is a brand kit document that includes all the style references we are going to include in our publication design. On the Brand Toolkit at a glance page, we can see that there are a series of gradients that we need to use. So back into the document with the frame selected, I'll press Command D on Mac or Control D on PC to place an image. I'll navigate into the download folder, click into folder 4 Project, into the Design Expo folder, click into folder 1 Media Kit, click into the Assets folder, into folder 3 Graphic Textures, into the Gradient folder, and click to open the green PSD. Upon placing, the image may appear large in the frame. Here I can press Escape to deselect the image inside the frame, click to select the frame, right click down to fit in, and select Fill Frame Proportionally. And that will reduce the image size inside the frame to fit the image to the width of the frame. Now this is quite a luminous image. If it's looking pretty dull on your end, come up to Edit, down to Transparency Blend Space, and click on RGB. And if it's looking a bit pixelated, come up to View, down to Display Performance, and click on High Quality. So that's the first element in the collage. Next, I'm going to start bringing the elements in on top. But before that, I'm just going to come over to the Layers panel and hit the lock icon on the base layer, as to not accidentally select this. So looking back at my final designs, we can see that each design features a grayscale image with texture around it. So this time, with the Elements layer selected, I'll press Command D on Mac or Control D on PC to place an image. I'll navigate into the download folder, click into folder 4 Project, into the Design Expo folder, click into folder 1 Media Kit, click into the Assets folder, into folder 4 Image Treatment, into the Objects folder and click to open the Hand with Pencil PSD. Upon click, I'll click and drag to drop in the image like so, and it will appear in my comp. What we've just placed into our composition is a transparent image. With the frame selected, I'll either come to the links panel and click Edit Original, or I'll hold Alt on the keyboard and double click on the worksheet thumbnail, and the document will open up in Photoshop. So here we can see a grayscale image, but if we look in the Layers panel, we can see a number of layers creating this effect. If I toggle off the adjustment layers above, we can see that this image is actually a colored image. Applied to this, we have an Add Noise Smart Filter, and if I toggle on the visibility of the base layer below, we can see a solid white background. So when working with digital art and collages, it can help to prepare your images effectively in this way. I like to cut all my pieces out before I start using them to give me maximum flexibility and allow them to blend in with other images. For now, I'll close and not save and come back into InDesign. So when developing digital collages, it can be very difficult to know where to place anything until all the elements are on the canvas. So now I've got the grey image. Next, I'll bring in some texture elements. To do this, I'm going to jump back into the brand toolkit. If we scroll down, we can see a texture page where we can see there are a few on offer. Here we have some linked texture documents and some that have been already pasted straight into InDesign, which we can grab quickly. So here we can do one of two things. We can either quickly grab a texture here, or we can grab it from the original Illustrator document. For the sake of this video, I'll just show you where this texture came from. So with the selection tool, I'll select the large dot texture frame. I'll either come to the links panel and click Edit Original, or I'll hold Alt on the keyboard and double click on the worksheet thumbnail, and the document will open up in Illustrator. So here is an Illustrator document where I have created a grid texture of circles previously. If I press Command plus apostrophe on Mac or Control plus apostrophe on PC, we can toggle on and off the grid where you can see the structure I based this grid on. To create this, I simply set up a square grid in the background, which I have used to place down my circles to create a perfect grid texture. Now some of this I've already pasted into InDesign, but in this instance, I'll just take some dots from my texture here so you can see how easy it is. With the selection tool, I'll click and drag from the top left and select 5 across and 5 down. I'll copy, back into InDesign, I'll just paste it in, move my mouse cursor over the bottom right anchor point, press and hold Shift and click and drag in to scale down like so. Then if I click off to deselect the object and then click back on it, we can see that upon pasting in the texture, it's automatically created a group. With the direct selection tool, if we move our mouse cursor over the individual circles, we can see they are indeed individual vector shapes that can be edited individually. If we wanted, we could right click and ungroup these, but for now I'll leave them set to a group. Okay, so that's our first bit of texture in our InDesign comp. Next I want to get in another texture, but this time instead of circles I want squares. So back into my brand kit, this time I can select from one of the pre-made sample textures over on the left here. If I click this, we can see it's already a group that's been pasted into the kit like I just demonstrated. But just for you to know, over on the right here, if I click on the square medium texture, I'll either come to the links panel and click Edit Original, or I'll hold Alt on the keyboard and double click on the worksheet thumbnail. The document will open up in Illustrator. Now I could either copy the texture from here back into InDesign like I did before, or I'll just close this one down, come back to my brand kit and just select the squares here, which is exactly the same texture as that document we just saw in Illustrator. So I'll click my sample here on the left, copy, and paste it into my new document. Again, I'll move my mouse cursor over the bottom right hand anchor point, press and hold Shift and click and drag in to scale down like so, and just move it down towards the bottom. So looking back at my finished design, we can see that the last visual elements to include are the single, circle, and square shapes. So I'll come into the Tools menu, grab the Square Frame tool, come and click and drag while holding Shift to draw a perfect square. Into the Tools menu, I'll come down and click the Default Fill and Stroke button to set the fill to transparent and the stroke to black. In the Stroke panel, I'll set the size to 10 and make sure to click the Align Stroke to the inside. Next, with the Selection tool, I'll click and drag down while holding Alt to make a quick duplicate of my square. With it selected, I'll come up to Object, down to Convert Shape, and I'll set this to an ellipse. Easy. So now I have some elements on my page. I can now start to think about the overall composition and how I'm going to arrange them. Next, I'm just going to start to position my elements. I'll increase the size of the grey image element. I'll move the textures around to interact with the image. I'll also click and drag on the textures while holding Alt to make a quick duplicate. And I'll do this for the circle and the square texture, so I have two examples of both. I'll move these around, scale them up and down to create some nice contrast. I can also duplicate one of the squares or circles, again move them around and perhaps change one from a stroke to a fill, and I can also adjust the stroke size on one of the shapes until I have a rough layout like this. What we want to achieve here is an interesting looking composition where the elements create lots of movement and lots of dynamic layers. For now, I think this is looking pretty cool as a composition, but I now want to change the colors, as I don't want to keep the shapes and textures set to black. Now we have an initial composition sorted, I'm going to start working with some color. So looking back at my final designs, you can see the color approach I took for my collage. Here I'm using the dark and light colors of the Design Expo brand. So back to our document, come up to the top of the swatches panel, click the menu and come down and click on load swatches. Upon click, you can see a window appear, and here we can navigate to the download folder, into folder 4 project, into the Design Expo folder, click into folder 1 media kit, click into the assets folder, into folder 5 color swatch, and click to open the Design Expo palette document. Upon click, we will now see the colors present in our swatches panel in a folder. Nice. So now we have our swatches, applying color is really easy. So first I'll click the bottom left dot texture. Now because these are essentially vector shapes, I can come to the tools menu, click on the fill color, I'll come into the swatches menu, click to set the fill color to fluoro. While holding shift, I'll click on the other dot and square textures. With the fill square selected, I'll set this to midnight. I'll select the solid square and set this to solaro. I'll select the other objects, and with the stroke color selected, I'll set this to fluoro. And just like that, we've applied some color. Now we have some really interesting color dynamics, where the highlight colors stand out against the gray and the textures look nice and clear against the background gradient. Nice. Now we could leave it there, but there is a little bit more we can do to manage our layers to add some more depth. Right now, all these layers exist in the order in which they were brought in. What we can do next is just shuffle the layer hierarchy so we can bring some elements to the front and push some of the elements back to create a little bit more dynamics in the layers. Now we can do this one of two ways. So first, I'll click and select the grey image. With it selected, we can either right click, come down to arrange and choose from one of the options here, or we can use some of the keyboard shortcuts. So with the object selected, I'll press Command plus Shift plus closed square bracket on Mac, or Control plus Shift plus closed square bracket on PC, and this will enable you to bring a selected object to the front of the layer hierarchy. Next, I'll select the bottom left texture, and again press Command plus Shift plus closed square bracket on Mac, or Control plus Shift plus closed square bracket on PC, and this will again bring the texture to the front of the layer hierarchy. So next I want to bring the circle stroke to the front, but this time with the selection tool, as I go to select it, the main grey image is now in the way. To easily click through images to select images below others, with the selection tool we can press and hold Command on Mac or Control on PC. And we can click to select, and as we click to select, we can click through the layer hierarchy until we get to the object we want. So once I click through to select the circle stroke, again I'll press Command plus Shift plus closed square bracket on Mac, or Control plus Shift plus closed square bracket on PC, and this will bring the circle stroke to the front in the layer hierarchy. That's how easy it can be to tweak the layer hierarchy, to shuffle the layers around to get a little bit more depth in your layers. Nice. So that's how we can create a simple collage composition and manage multiple images and textures in InDesign. Now I could leave it there, but for this particular brand motif, we also have a text element. Looking back at the final designs, we can see that as part of the collage designs, there are some text elements to help distinguish the categories. In the final designs, we can see there are lots of categories from graphic design to product design, and we also have examples with speakers and attendees. So to complete the collage composition, we're just going to finish it off with the final text element. So with the selection tool, I'll click and drag over all the visual elements and press Command plus G on Mac or Control plus G on PC to group them. And for now, I'll just move them over to the left to create some space for the text element. To begin, I'll come over to the layers panel, I'll click on the type layer, I'll come over to the tools menu, grab the text tool, and click and drag across the top of the canvas and down a little to draw a text frame. Now for this frame, I'm just going to type in graphic, and then straight after the word graphic, I'll press enter to add a hard return, and I'll type in the word design. Now back into the brand toolkit, on the at a glance page, we can see that for the typeface, we will need to use base new. So I'll select the text, I'll set it to base new, then click the drop down on the family and select super extended semi-bold. In this instance, I'll change the font size to 60 and hit the all caps button. If the text is too large for the frame, I'll pull it down to see it all. I'll select the word design. Into the tools menu, I'll hit the swap fill and stroke effect. I'll push the font size up to 70, change the font to super extended bold, set the stroke to 1.5, and with all the text selected, up in the control panel, I'll set the leading to 60. I'll select the word graphic, change the fill color to midnight, select the word design, change the stroke color to Solaro. Up in the control panel, I'll make sure that the reference point is set to the top left. Then I'll press R to activate the rotation tool and click and drag near the bottom right corner point while holding shift to snap to 90 degrees. I'll drag my text frame down and across to sit over on the right hand side. I'll double click on the left middle anchor point and that will snap the text frame to sit snug on the text. Lastly, I'd like to add a little bit more space between my letters. So I'll double click into my text frame to select all the text, and up in the control panel, I'll add 120 to the tracking, press escape to deselect the text, move my elements around so it feels a little more comfortable, and that completes the initial collage composition. Nice. So once you're happy with one layout, it's very easy to duplicate. I'll come into the Pages panel, click the first page, right click and duplicate spread. Upon click, that will make a duplicate beneath my page. Next, I'll come over to the Page panel, I'll click on the top right menu, scroll down, and currently we can see a tick next to allow document pages to shuffle. I'll click this to remove the tick. Then in the Pages panel, I'll click on my second page and just drag it up next to my first page. When I see a line next to the page, I'll release and that will snap the page next to it. And you will also see the page be immediately next to the page in the work area. Next, I'll come into the Tools panel, I'll click on the Page tool, I'll click on Page 2, make sure Object Move with Page is checked up in the Control panel, and just drag it to the right, putting some space between the pages. Easy. So now we've essentially created a template we can change. Here I can click into the texture frame, change graphic to fashion. I'll come into the Layers panel, lock both the type and elements layer and unlock the base layer. This will make it really easy for me to come and select my base gradient circle. Now for this approach, I want a square instead of a circle. To change this real easy, with the circle selected, I'll come up to Object, down to Convert Shape, come down and select Rectangle. I'll come back into the Layers panel, lock the base layer and unlock the Elements layer. I can click on the grey image. With it selected, I'll press Command+D on Mac or Control+D on PC to place an image. I'll navigate into the Download folder, click into Folder 4 Project, into the Design Expo folder, click into Folder 1 Media Kit, click into the Assets folder, into Folder 4 Image Treatment, into the Objects folder, and click to open the Mannequin PSD. Upon placing, the image will appear large in the frame. One quick tip here, if we double click on the bottom middle anchor point, this will then extend the frame to the content inside. Then I can press S on the keyboard to activate the Scale tool. I'll place my mouse cursor around the bottom right anchor point. While holding Shift, I'll click and drag to scale the image and frame down together. Then I'll press V to activate the Selection tool. I'll click on the bottom middle anchor point and pull this up to crop the image inside. Then I'll just position on the square below, and if I need to, I can use S again to activate the Scale tool and scale up or down to get the correct size I want. And then I can click on the neighboring visual elements, reposition these, perhaps change the color of some of the elements, and just like that, I have a completely new composition created in half the time. So looking back at my final designs, we can see that for the categories, I have 4 designs, 2 of which appear to have a solid stroke effect in the background as opposed to the solid. So back into the main document, I'll come into the Pages panel and just click to add 2 pages. And these 2 pages will appear below my 2 pages above. In the Pages panel, I'll click page 3 and drag it up next to page 2. I'll use the Page tool to drag it across to the right to put some space between. I'll click on page 4, drag it up next to page 3 and use the Page tool to click and drag to give it some space, and now I have 4 pages. To make this easy, I'll come into page 1, make sure the layers are unlocked. I'll drag over with my Selection tool to select all the elements. Press and hold Alt and click and drag over to page 3 and carefully position in the center. Keep in mind, by doing this, all the layer elements will still reside on their correct layers. I'll do the same for page 2. With the Selection tool, I'll click over all the elements on page 2, click and drag right while holding Alt and duplicate them across, and carefully position on page 4. So now I have 4 pages with 4 digital collages. Just like earlier, I can come and change all the details. I'll click the lock icon on both the type and elements, and I'll toggle off the visibility. On page 3, I'll come and select the circle base layer. I'll press Command plus C on Mac or Control plus C on PC. Then I'll press Command plus Alt plus Shift plus V on Mac, or Control plus Shift plus Alt plus V on PC, and that will paste in place on top. I'll press A to activate the direct selection tool. I'll click into my new frame to select the image inside and press Delete. Then I'll come to the Tools menu, hit the fill color and set this to white. Up in the control panel, I'll make sure that the reference is set to the middle. Then with the selection tool, I'll place my mouse cursor over the middle right anchor and drag in while holding Alt and Shift, and that will scale down nicely. And upon release, I will mask away some of the background image to create what appears to be a thick stroke. I'll do the same process on the last page, copy and paste the square on top, remove the image inside, set the fill color to white, scale down, and then toggle back the visibility of the type and elements layers. Now it's just a case of changing the text, changing the grey images inside, recomposing the elements, and now I have 4 unique brand motifs ready to use in future. And it doesn't have to end there. If we come back to the final designs, we can see that below there is another 4 compositions, but instead of the design categories, here we have speakers and attendees. If we wanted to go even further to create additional compositions, we could simply come into the Pages panel, click on the first page, press and hold Shift and click on the 4th page, right-click and duplicate, and now we have another 4 pages ready to change. By following the same process we just used, we can easily replace all the grey images, replace all the text, recompose the visual elements, and now we have lots of digital collage compositions we can use in future. Perfect. So that's how you can create digital collage compositions, manage a lot of visual elements, and quickly make permutations in InDesign. Now we have built up some brand artwork, we can now move on to create one of the most popular marketing documents one can create in InDesign. In the next video, we are going to look at how we can set up a poster in InDesign. So see you in the next video.